Hello everybody, my name is Happy and I'd like to welcome you all to my History Reaction channel. Today we're returning for some more Sabaton. This time we're going to be taking a look at Night Witches, the Noctexan by Sabaton. And if you want to show a little love and appreciation for Sabaton, I will have a link to the original video in the description down below. So please head over to them, let them know that you really appreciate their music, their videos, and everything that goes along with it. Right, with that said, we'll just go ahead and get into this. Theoretically.
The Germans are resting behind the lines of the Eastern Front, their tents in neat rows. All is in order in the quiet and still of the night. It's cold, and the winter snow crunches under the jackboot of a guard. Looking up into the sky, the snow starts to drift down. It's peaceful here. Was that a noise from the sky? No, it's just the wind. Suddenly, piercing the still of the night, there's an otherworldly scream and a whoosh as a dark form speeds by. And was that a woman's laughter in the distance? There are no engine sounds, and the suddenly fearful German soldier loses his footing and whispers under his breath, "Die Nocthexen." The world is all at once a bloom of fire and ash, and two more dark forms pass without a sound. Hearing the whooping and celebration of these supernatural creatures, the guard shakes himself from his fear and calls out, "Die Nocthexen! Die Nocthexen!"
So let's talk about the Noctexan, the Night Witches. This was in World War II. The Night Witches were a unit of aerial fighters from the Soviet Union, made up of women. And yeah, they were terrifying. They were famous for attacking at night, hence the name the Night Witches. And they were flying what were essentially training planes and crop dusters, often made of wood, among other things. And they would shut off their engines for their final run and glide in to drop their bombs on their targets. This made them essentially stealth bombers for the period. And they were quite effective, not necessarily at hitting their targets. If I remember correctly, they did not have fancy instrumentation or anything like that, and they were trying to hit targets at night, which is a bit harder. But that wasn't really the point. They did damage. They did, damage any way you look at it. They often did hit their targets because they were aiming for bigger targets. But more importantly, they had a severe psychological effect on the Germans. They were very much a morale tactic as well as a strategic tactic, try to break the enemy morale, and at that they were exceptionally good. They were genuinely feared.
The Night Witches! In the sky above, 3 planes of the soon-to-be famous 588th Night Bomber Regiment, their engines now running, turn east for home. Time to rearm and refuel for another mission. Coming into land, they're greeted by their commissar, Yevdokia Rashkevich. The young girls that form the pilots and navigators are between the ages of 17 and 26. They are desperate to take the fight to the Germans and have traveled from all over Russia to join the all-women regiments. The 588th is where the least skilled of all the women are placed.
Okay, I got some exceptions to make here. Nothing major, though. They didn't just come from all over Russia. I would assume they came from all over the Soviet Union. So you may have had Georgians, Ukrainians, and other client states as well, or whatever you want to call them. Other states from the Soviet Union, in addition to the Russians. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I would assume it. It's better to say it was women from all over the Soviet Union. They were not the least skilled of women. They were the least experienced. There's a difference. These were women who had gone through some training, but they did not have, extended flight time. So, least skilled, I don't think that's the right word, but the idea is right. These were the least experienced.
But that didn't stop them from carving their name in history. In the early days, they were largely ridiculed by the Soviet men. Given men's uniforms that were too big, and shoes all of the same size, the women did the best they could with the clothes, making them fit with belts or filling the large men's shoes with stuffing.
They did.
The equipment they were given was woefully out of date. The Polikarpov Po-2 was a two-man trainer, underpowered and made of cloth and wood. These old string bags were nicknamed crop dusters, or even worse, sewing machines due to the noise their tiny engines made. But the women of the 588 ignored the taunts, and despite the odds, turned the plane's shortcomings to their advantage.
Yes.
The planes at maximum speeds were far below the stall speeds of any of the German fighters.
Yeah, that's actually true. Some of the disadvantages of the plane, the Po-plane, the Po-2, were absolutely an advantage in some cases. I think they had a max speed of right around 60 miles an hour. So these are not fast planes by any stretch. And German fighter pilots talked about how hard it was to deal with these guys because you couldn't get on their tail and, fight with them. You just go right past them. They were actually surprisingly hard to hit. And because of their slower speed, they were actually a little more maneuverable in certain circumstances. They could change their directions much quicker and more effectively, tighter turns, that kind of thing. So they were notoriously hard to shoot down by other planes. Now, they were vulnerable to ground fire, flak cannons and things like that, as well as even just small arms if they got low enough. So there was a definite disadvantage to being slow as well.
Giving them a tight turning circle, they were almost impossible to hit. They were susceptible to small arms fire and anti-aircraft guns, so their strategy was to attack in threes, with a navigator in each plane. At her signal, the pilot would cut the engines and swoop in slowly, silently, dropping their bombs, dealing death from above. Unexpected, undetected, stealth perfected. If necessary, the other two would draw fire from the fighters or from the ground. They slept during the day and rose at dusk to take their vengeance on the invaders.
Yeah, they did typically fly in threes, although that wasn't always the case. And yeah, sometimes two of them would provide cover by distracting ground fire or deliberately distracting searchlights so that the third plane could make their bombing run. Then the third plane would circle around and take the place of one of the other two planes in distracting activity while another one of the three would go in. So they kind of had this rotation going on. But that was a common tactic they used. Two for distraction, one to make a run, then that one would circle back to join the other three, and then they would make another pass with one of the planes that had been previously providing distraction, now making a bombing run. These planes could only carry one or two bombs each, so they were limited in what they could do, but they made the best of it, and they were quite effective.
This unnatural bravery in their stealth tactics earned them their title, the Night Witches. The German ace Johannes Steinhoff said, "We simply couldn't grasp that the Soviet airmen that caused us the greatest trouble were in fact women. These women feared nothing."
Night, the witches on the fight. Never miss the mark. Canvas, wings of death, prepare to meet your fate. Night Bomber Regiment, 588. Undetected, unexpected, wings of glory, tell the story. Deviation, deviation, undetected, stealth perfected. Also losing ground, retreat into the sound. Get this in the air. Suddenly appears confirming all your fears. Strength from which is there. Target bound from around, battle sound from the battleground. Saving high. Lodging awaits, defeat them The gates slip to fight and fly. Canvas wings of death, prepare to meet your fate. Night Bomber Regiment 388. Undetected, unexpected, wings of glory, tell the story. Aviation, deviation, undetected, still perfected. Beneath the starlight of the heavens, unlikely heroes in the skies, as they appear on the horizon, the wind will whisper when the night witches come. Undetected, unexpected, wings of glory, tell the story. Aviation, deviation, undetected, still perfected. From the depths of Ellie's islands, faster smells, explosive violence. Russian nighttime flight, perfected. Flawless vision, undetected.
32 women, both pilots and navigators, never came home. The 588th became highly decorated and respected, flying more than 23,000 sorties.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the musical section. I don't see a need to go back because most of what it covers is what's been covered in the discussions that we're having before and after. As usual, great music by Sabaton. There were a couple references in there. I noticed that they still use Russian, but I think it's still better to say Soviet because I'm sure some of these girls were probably from places, like I said, from the Ukraine, Georgia, and all the other, the various stands and so on. In addition, they did mention Rodina awaits or something. Rodina waits. Rodina is the Russian word for motherland. So that's what they were talking about. The motherland waits. Other than that, I think most of the rest of it was self-explanatory based on what we saw in the introduction. It was extremely dangerous. They did have 32 deaths. When you consider each plane had 2 people. And, you know, the whole nature of this war with the German invasion of the Soviet Union, not surprising. In fact, I'd be more surprised that there weren't more casualties. Again, these were some of the least experienced women flyers they had.
Dropping over 3,000 tons of bombs. 23 Night Witches were awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union, although they were disbanded just 6 months after the war and not allowed to fly in the victory parade, given their planes were so slow.
Yeah.
From 19...
That's actually true. They wanted them to fly in the victory parade, but the planes just couldn't match the other planes in terms of speed, so they decided not to include them in the victory parade.
1956, after she retired from active service, their commissar Yevdokia Rashkevich took it upon herself to find the site of every single one of her girls that was downed, to mark the place and to pay her respects to each one of the incredibly brave Night Witches.
Now, the commissar was actually the second in command of the unit. There was one woman, and I don't remember her name, that ranked above her, that was in charge of the 588th. But the commissar is absolutely the one that, as they just said, went out and deliberately tried to find the final resting places of all these women that died and set up memorials and things like that for them. So that absolutely is true. I just want to make it clear that she wasn't the overall commander. She was second in command. All right, and that's it. That was a good one. I really liked that. When we think of women in World War II, I don't know about the rest of the world, but here in the States, we tend to think of Rosie the Riveter and the women contributing to the war effort by taking jobs in the factories, helping raise money through war bonds. My grandmother literally was a Rosie the Riveter. She actually was in Long Beach on her 18th birthday when Japan dropped the bombs on Pearl Harbor. December 7th, 1941 was her 18th birthday. She never forgot that. She hated her birthday ever since. But shortly after that, once the U.S. entered the war, she got a job at the shipyards in Long Beach, California, riveting airplanes. So she literally was a riveter during that time. Um, but let's not forget that there were women, even then, serving in uh, more active military roles around the world. We had our own women's Air Force here in the United States, although they were primarily charged with moving aircraft from base to base. I don't know how many flyers we had in actual combat, but I do know that we had women that were um, participating in the transport of plane from base to base, for example. The Soviet Union absolutely used women in battle as snipers and, as we see here, as the Night Witches. Um, very different. And of course, the Soviet Union was in a situation where they needed everybody they could get. So they weren't going to be picky either way. Uh, Stories like this are great. And I love seeing something like this where, I mean, these are in every way underdogs for the World War II era. They're women, they're in outdated, like I said, wooden and cloth airplanes, and they are the least experienced of the flyers among the women. And yet they make a huge difference. And the Germans at least came to respect them quite a bit. All right, so thank you for joining me. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope we learned something. And we'll be back next week for some more music on Thursdays. Until then, thank you for joining me. Bye bye.